welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new here. I have decided to judge the Booktube prize again. So as of right now, so the Booktube prize announcement for the field, so all the books in the Octofinals is being announced in about 20 minutes. I have no idea. I've seen the list of possibilities, and I made a spreadsheet of the how interested I am in the different ones. But I have decided to judge round one. This could go great, could go disastrous. I also signed up for both fiction and nonfiction, so I have no idea which one I'm getting. And I'm gonna watch it, and then I'm gonna come back to you and open my ballot and find out A, am I reading fiction or nonfiction? And B, what 6 books I'm going to be reading over the next 2 months. So I will say that the lists look great in terms of what is out there. There's actually, in terms of the ones that got through, there's more in fiction, I think, than nonfiction that I listed as no interest whatsoever. Yeah, for sure. But overall, I feel like there's a lot of books that I am interested in both fiction and nonfiction. So it's time to see what I got. It looks like I got, okay. I think I got fiction. I'm not looking at the graphics. So it says fiction section E. I don't know how to feel about that. Okay, hold on. Let me pull up. So, Sarah Perry, Enlightenment. I own that book, so that's fantastic. Definitely going to be reading that. The Elif Shafak book is there. So, There Are Rivers in the Sky. Not my first pick, but I do like the way that she writes. So, let's see. Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout, I had marked as medium interest. I don't know if this is part of her, does she have a series? I don't know. I don't know about that one. The Heart in Winter, I have marked as medium interest, so that's good. Creation Lake, I have as low interest, but it's not a never. And then the Tana French book, The Hunter. So none of the books in my category did I have marked as never wanting to read them. So I will take it. That's great. Interesting. I love that I own one of them. I've not read any of these. And I think out of the entire list, I have only read 3 of them, and then I own 3 more. So getting a grouping that has a book that I was already going to read in the first place, love that for me. That will probably be the book that I start first, but I need to look up and see if I can get the rest of these through my various library, either apps or physical library books. This is the first one that I am going to be reading. Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. Again, this is the 5th in I think it's more of a companion group of novels. So it's Olive Kitteridge and O. William and those. So I think that I'll be fine. The first kind of 5 pages are kind of introducing us to the town and the characters. So it feels very much like we are, I'm not being dropped in the middle of a part 5 of a series. So I feel like I'm going to be okay. And it's set in the real world, so there's no world building that I'm missing. So I think that is all positive. I read the first chapter already, and I like the writing. And this is honestly the kind of book I need right now, because I got just finished with a really confusing, intense slog of a book with a lot of world building. So my brain is give me something that's cozy and simple. And this feels like the right choice for that. So I'm going to read this first. I will be back to you. It has 4 sections, so like 4 books in it. So I'll either be back to you when I finish book 1, or I'll be back to you when I finish book 2 and I'm like 50% in. Not totally sure. I'll play it by ear. I am back at the halfway point of Tell Me Anything by Elizabeth Strout. And the first thing I'll say is I don't think that my reading of this suffers at all, having not read the books that came before this. Mostly because in the very first couple of chapters, she does a really good job of like teeing up who these people are and what their personalities are like and what this town is and is like. I think if I had read the other ones, then like the context would be richer and I would have a better understanding of these people. But I don't think that that is a requirement of reading this, which is great. This to me is very refreshing from all the things I've been reading the past month, mostly because it's just like slice of life in this small town. And we are, bouncing between a few different characters in the town and learning about their day-to-days. They're all like telling stories. So this is very much about people's stories and kind of like what makes people people and what are the things that people live within their lives that other people may not be aware of. I love that. I think that that is a sentiment that we could all do with like thinking about more. So I'm enjoying this a lot. I'm reading it really quickly, and that is also fantastic. Her writing is very approachable and her characters are really interesting, and there's just a lot going on, but in like a really quiet way. There is a like murder investigation going on in the book that our main character Bob is like representing as a lawyer. That's in the blurb. So there is that kind of moving the plot forward in that we are following the progress of like him interviewing his client, interviewing other people, learning more about the story of this family and what could have led to this person being murdered. The whodunit aspect. I personally think I already know who did it, and if that is how it goes, I think you're intended to know early, because again, it's all about the stories of people's lives that you may not know just looking at a person at face value, or even being friends with somebody, but not like really going deep with those people in your life. So I think this is definitely a winner for me in terms of like enjoyment and just like writing craft. So I finished this. I don't know what I expected going into this, but this was delightful. It was just like everything I needed at this moment. It's about a small community in Maine, and it's just sort of like their day-to-day life a little bit, but it's about stories and about how everyone has their own story of their life, and like people have these unrecorded lives essentially, so like things that have happened to them that very few people know. And so like it shows up in different ways. So Olive Kitteridge, who's in a different book, so Olive and Lucy have these like little chats where they each tell each other stories, and it's like about things that have happened to people and how it made those people who they are. And then you have this investigation happening about this family where the mom is like murdered, and they think the son did it, but there's like 3 kids, and it's all of this like finding out about that. And again, I think I said before that it was pretty obvious who actually did it. And so this wasn't really about that like murder investigation. In fact, that felt very like subplotty. But in that, you also get to see the mother's story, the brother's story, the sister's story, not as much about the other brother, but like their stories and then the stories of the people around them. And then you get to know our kind of main protagonist, which is Bob, and like his story. And it's so interesting because you get all these little nuggets about the things that people don't share and their unrecorded lives. And then it's like tied all together by a story that Olive tells Lucy at the end that just is so beautiful. But one of the things that one of the little tidbits is there's somebody in the book that's like a very minor character. And they talk about how like she isn't well liked because her politics differ from people in the county. And essentially it talks about how like she's super lonely, and then she meets somebody on like a political website, and it talks about like how he like about them. It's very short, and then the way that like the story about them ends is that he asks about why she volunteers at the food bank, and she tells him, and then he says like, well, people take advantage of that. I've known people who go in and just steal. And he's like, but it's okay if you want to keep working there. And then it says, as time went by, Charlene stopped volunteering at the food bank in Crosby, and she gradually stopped taking Lucy's phone calls. And in this way, the situation in the country divided itself further. And it's just like a very small nugget, but it is a really good example of telling the story that we're not telling. So like this woman wanted so badly to find somebody to care for her, and she chose that over caring for other people. And just like that's how she fell into this like political divide essentially. But like that's just like a tiny little nugget, but I'm like those kind of things are how she tells stories and helps you think about like how like the little things that we don't understand about why other people make the choices they make. And like I'm getting a little worked up about it just because I just thought it was masterfully done. And this has absolutely encouraged me to pick up the other books that Elizabeth Strout has written in this like universe, essentially, this town, because she's a fantastic writer. And I want to go back and spend more time with these people because it's lovely in the town of Crosby. Editing Jenny here. I am coming to you because I thought about this like halfway through. That would be a great idea to have like a ranking thing. I'm showing you. It's right here. So that I can say like when I read the book where I think it'll fall in my ranking and like move them throughout depending on how things go. So for Tell Me Everything, right now it is 100% in the first place spot. All right, we're starting book number 2. There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. Here's the thing. First of all, I think this is the longest book in my entire grouping, which I don't love because while I liked The Island of Missing Trees, I didn't love it. And I sometimes can find Elif Shafak's writing to be a little bit pretentious unnecessarily. So we'll see how I feel about this one. I think it has like 3 perspectives, and I've read the first chapter, and one of the things that Elif Shafak does that I don't like is she makes inanimate objects characters, and already we have seen where a droplet of water is like anthropomorphized or whatever. Like it has thoughts and feelings. And I love that. That's not a thing I like in literature. So I have a feeling that's going to carry out, just like the tree in the Island of Missing Trees had thoughts and feelings. So there's that. But I have to hold out optimism because this is almost a 500-page book that I will be reading physically. I'm like 19 pages in. And again, I think her writing is fine. And I liked the last book I read of hers, just didn't love it. So we will see how I fare with this. I will probably check in once I get to the next part, which is like 140 pages in, just to let you know how I'm getting along with it. And then we'll go from there. So I was going to wait and do a check-in at there's 4 parts at the second part because that's approximately halfway through. But I'm a third of the way through this book and I have things to say. First of all, I am more into this than I expected to be. However, there's a thing she does that absolutely drives me batty. So she will make lists. So just out of nowhere, she just starts listing things. And I was going to tab every time she did it, but I decided that was just petty. So I didn't. But there is this whole section where he goes to the Crystal Palace and literally on one page, it says, to his left and right appeared pavilions representing places that he met only in books. China, India, Spain, France, Portugal, Germany, Russia, Sweden, Canada, United States, and the Ottoman Empire. In each is displayed plenitudes of objects. Spices, minerals, textiles, jewelry, pistols, tapestries, agricultural products, surgical tools, and stuffed animals with eyes that gleam like marbles. Ma'am, you could have just said, to his left and right appeared pavilions representing places that he had only met in books. In each is displayed a plenitude of objects. I don't need to know the countries. I don't need to know the objects. It adds literally nothing to the story. Nothing. And she does this all the time. It'll be like you run out of the corner onto a street with shops and then just an exhaustive list of the types of shops on the street. Or names of people or books. Not necessary. Adds nothing. This book could be probably a full 30 pages shorter if she would just take out the freaking lists. Drives me batty. I skim them for the most part because they just don't add anything. And maybe that's just a stylistic thing of hers. But honestly, I think an editor should have caught that, edited it out. It's just unnecessary. So I have that to say. That is very a small thing and is nitpicky because it drives me crazy. But other than that, I am having a good time with this. There are 3 main perspectives. 3? There's the 1850s. There is 2014 and 2018. I think that's it. Yes, we had a little intro thing from somebody from the 400s or something like that. That adds some context that we connects later. And there are some really neat connections. That's something I will say about El Shafak is she's really good at tying in really subtle connections. Because there is a moment in that first part where somebody involves fire and this statue that gets bumped. And then later we have a character who's I wonder what caused this burn mark on this. So we see those things throughout it. And I think there's been some other connections and stuff. So the interconnectedness of her stories are always really interesting and fascinating. And I think that's going to be the case with this one as well. So looking forward to continuing this one and having a pretty good time. Okay, so I am 300 pages into this. I just finished the third section. So I have one section to go and about 130 pages or so. And it's readable, it's approachable. I have realized that the character of Arthur is based on a real person, with much creative liberty, but that he was a real person, and that like that part of the story is based in historical, like it's historical fiction, which is really interesting. And I think once I finish this, I'll probably go back and like read a little bit about him. His name was not Arthur, but there's a character that's not a character. She is the great grandmother of one of the perspectives. I want her story, which I think we're going to get in some way because she lived in the same time as like the Arthur character. So I do think that is part of the story that we're going to learn, but like I'm more interested in her story than I am in his for some reason. I finished this. I enjoyed it. I think overall I give it like around 4 stars. I definitely went back and forth on like whether this was like a 3.75 or a 4 star. But ultimately, I think the characters were extremely rich. And I think the main like themes about how water is integral to humanity and to the world, and just like how water is in and of everything, was a really interesting concept. And I thought there were some beautiful little nuggets. I actually have a bunch of sticky notes in here. Yeah, she says, "You may struggle to believe me. Remember, though, what defies comprehension isn't the mysteries of the world, but the cruelties that humans are capable of inflicting upon each other." And then she says somewhere else, there's a thing about 3 cups or something like that. It says, "Hatred is a poison served in 3 cups. The first is when people despise those they desire because they want to have them in their possession. It's all out of hubris. The second is when people loathe those they do not understand. It's all out of fear. And then there is the third kind, when people hate those they have hurt." And I just thought that was really interesting because, I mean, that's so true that when you, like, people, when they're afraid or jealous or embarrassed, like a lot of times that manifests in like anger and hate. And that's so true in this book with like the whole power thing, because there's definitely a point where it's talking about how Arthur, who's the archaeologist, how he doesn't yet understand that by choosing what is remembered, you're also choosing what is forgotten. And then at another point, he's like, "But why didn't I hear about this?" And it's like understanding that because these people are not valued, their history is forgotten, or the massacre of their people is not newsworthy, things like that. So it's just, it does a really good job with those themes, and I think that's tied together throughout all the perspectives. I will say it was obvious to me that like all the perspectives are supposed to come together at some point, but like I couldn't see it until it did, and when it did, it felt super forced. So the way that like the very modern perspective, like the 2014 and the 2018 perspectives come together, or is how they all 3 connect. And I just thought it felt forced and a little unnecessary. Like I understand what they were trying to do in carrying like the cruelty theme throughout, but it just, I didn't particularly care for that, and I would have actually been fine with just Arthur's story. and like being Arthur's story and Naren's story to tell like, and Naren's story sort of helping you to understand a better rounded picture of Layla's story, who you don't get a perspective from. You only see through Arthur's eyes and through stories that Naren has received from her grandmother. And her story is super interesting, even though it's not actually told. But the way that she connects those two perspectives is really lovely. And yeah, I feel like I'm rambling, but I did enjoy this. I didn't love it, and I thought it dragged at the end, but I do think that it is worth reading. Editing Jenny again. So for I almost call it the Island of Missing Trees. For there are rivers in the sky. This one I kind of went back and forth with, but I think right now I'm going to place it at 3 because I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I am super hopeful that one of the remaining books will be like outstanding. I'm hoping it's outstanding. And fall in like the number 2 place. So I'm going to give this one number 3 for now. I have started this, The Hunter by Tana French. I'm actually already 20% in, so I forgot to like check in before I started the book. I didn't actually read the synopsis. This one's like the second one in a mystery crime series, I think. I will say, being dropped into it, I assume I'm supposed to know who at least one of these characters is, and I don't. And then they keep alluding to one of the characters' brothers being missing and her knowing that he is dead. And I can't decide if like that's the mystery from this or if that happened in the previous book. I don't know. So this one, I do think there is definitely a missing element to the story because I haven't read the previous book. So we'll see if that influences the rest of it. I did at first think like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to listen to this on audio because the narrator is like a really gruff sounding man. And initially it was just kind of like jarring and unpleasant to read. But I've kind of settled into a groove and I don't mind his voice anymore. So I think it'll be fine. I'm following the story. It's not, overly complicated. It's set in Ireland, and I'm not totally sure what's going on and what the crime is going to be. One of the characters' fathers has like returned after 4 years, and he's kind of a schmuck. He's like a smarmy car salesman type of guy, and he has like a plan, which feels very much like a get-rich-quick scheme, and I am trying to decide if like he did something to get him run like out of where he had gone, or if he's gonna do something. Unsure, but it's fine. Mystery crime in general is not my thing, so I suspect this probably isn't going to be high up on my list, but I could be surprised. So we are home from Virginia, and I drove from Chattanooga to Roanoke and listened to The Hunter for most of that time. And then on the way back when I drove, I like couldn't bring myself to listen to it. I just was like, I'm not in the mood because I just don't care. Like, I don't find the plot interesting. I don't find the characters compelling. Everybody's kind of unlikable and like makes dumb choices. And you just sort of like, just talk to each other. It's so, yeah. This one I definitely think is going to be my bottom 3. But I'm at like 49%, so I still have half of it to listen to. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be upping it to 2 times speed just to get through it. I have 2 in-office days this week, which means that I should be able to get in a good amount of audiobook listening to and from work. I'm just gonna make myself listen to it, even though I don't really want to, because that's the only way I'm gonna get through it. So there is that. The plot is kind of like about this, like, not surprising, it's kind of a deception plot, like they're deceiving the people of this town, but like we're 50% through and we already kind of like know who the bad guy is. So I'm like, what else is gonna happen? Like, is there an entire another subplot that hasn't even been introduced yet? Like, why is this book so long? Oh boy, I'm so glad to be done with this. So glad to be done with it. Yeah, so this is a book that I would never pick up on my own. Just full stop saying that. Not something I would ever pick up on my own. I've heard things, like, heard great things about Tana French, but this was not well written. So I'm confused because this just felt so messy and disconnected. And like, what are you doing, buddy? And like, when you find out the whodunit, like, maybe you could have gotten there on your own, but also like, it just, and probably had I read the first one in the book, there would be like some history that I would understand that would make some things make sense. But overall, I just didn't think this was good. And it definitely wasn't for me. So I would give this like 2.5 stars. Yeah, it's not good. I'm putting it obviously at number 6 because I hope that nothing that I read is worse than this. I have 3 books left, and I hope that nothing is worse than this. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We are starting this. I don't know, I had to be weird about it, but we're starting this. I have been watching Women's Prize long list prediction videos because it is still February when I'm starting this. And several people have mentioned they think this could make the long list. And whatever about that. But what I find so funny is that they've all called it like a Marmite book or said that it was like weird. And so this could go very much either way. I feel like, so last time I judged the Booktube Prize, I had to read Candy House by Jennifer Egan, and that was awful. And it probably, somebody would say that as a weird book, but like that was the wrong kind of weird for me. Whereas this one, I'm hoping is the right kind of weird, because I feel like Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh is McIntyre? Cursed Bread. I think it was it longlisted for the Women's Prize too? Anyways, that one was also considered like a Marmite book or a weird book, and I freaking loved that. So I'm hoping this is that kind of weird and that I'll really like it. I know very little about it. Something about, I think, a cult and a spy or something like that. Set in France somewhere. But yeah, I will report back on what kind of weird it is. Well, I am changing to the audiobook of this for a couple reasons. One, because this is, like, I'm not finding myself wanting to pick it up, and I'm a third of the way through. I will say the last 2 chapters I read felt slightly more interesting, and so that's something. But I also I'm obviously not like reading these books one at a time. I'm reading them like all in conjunction because it is the 2nd of March and I have 3 more to read. So, well, I have 2/3 of this and then 2 whole books to read. So I need to get moving on that. Plus, I'm like ready to read the things that I want to read already. So, yeah, I just need to pick up a different book physically, and I have the audiobook of this from the library, so I'm going to be finishing this out on audio. The audiobook is helping immensely with this. It's just okay. I mean, I can't imagine I would give this any more than just 3 stars. I don't care. I don't really know what's going on other than the fact that she is some kind of undercover, like, spy, and she's really not very good at it. And she is undercover with these people who live like a really rural life. One of them lives in like a series of caves, and she's been hired by somebody who she doesn't know at all to like figure out if these people have been like sabotaging trains and stuff. And she's dating somebody who's like connected to the group, but like she doesn't like him. She's just dating him to gain access. And now she's like there and talking to the people, but like we're 63% of the way through the book and nothing has happened. Like genuinely nothing. Like she's met up with the people, but like even now that she's met up with them, it's just like drivel about how like she hung out with them and they talked about these like theories and whatnot, and I could not care less. Like what's the point? And this was on the Booker long list. Maybe this is like too literary for me. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not having a good time. I'll tell you that. So I finished Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. And since I started this has now also been added to the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction long list. I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why this is on so many prize lists. It is boring. Like, I guess there is something to be said for, like, the changes by the government to environment for the worse. So, like, they talk about mega basins and destroying farmland to plant, like, a monocrop of corn and stuff like that. So like I get the conversation about like climate and about destruction of our environment, but it's told from the perspective of this absolutely horrid, completely unlikable woman who's like supposedly like a brilliant spy. She's terrible. Like she is so obvious and so bad at being a spy, and also just like insufferable to listen to. And she's like kind of lured by the idea of one of the men and like his theories, and she's just bad at what she does. The whole thing is stream of consciousness, which might be a me problem. I really don't like books that are stream of consciousness. And so I think that is probably a huge part of why this doesn't work for me. But like, it is so boring and nothing happens. Like it's 400 pages of like her just talking about what's going on. And sometimes like a slow book works, but this is supposed to be like leading up to this big thing that she's like trying to get them to do. And when it comes, it's like 3 pages, and then it's like more about what she's doing. So I just like, this doesn't feel like it says anything that other books don't say better. And also, like, it was insufferable to read. If I hadn't switched to audiobook and listened to it on 2 times speed, I would still be at the 50% mark of this. So this is trash. I am going to put it at number 5, because even though I didn't like this, I still gave it a 3. Like, it's fine. But the 6th place book, The Hunter, really is just like, how can you write a bad mystery? Like a mystery thriller that's just boring. So this ultimately like edges it out by half a star, and that's depressing. I did just get the ebook of this, which is the one book that I was having like a really hard time getting hold of. I had put it on hold at the library, or like asked them to buy it at the library, and usually that means when it comes in, you get the physical copy first. They didn't even tell me they got it. So I ended up being second on the hold list, which is not a huge deal, except that somebody has it, and I need them to return it before the end of March. But I was also on the ebook wait list for the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, and I did get that one. So I will be starting this one this evening on my Kindle, and hoping that this one is like a really approachable, fast read. It's the shortest of the bunch, and I know absolutely nothing about it. I have not read the synopsis, so I have no idea what I'm in for. But yeah, once I put the little to bed tonight, I'm going to start this book to make a head start on it. So I started reading A Heart in Winter. Where does Robert find these books? Because this is just like a stream of consciousness of like a drunk man for like the first 15% of this book. Like I'm 15% into it, and it's just like this ridiculous raving drunk man. Like I read the synopsis at some point, but like, what? At this point I'm getting slightly frustrated with the Booktube prize a little bit, because I feel like every year there's like all these books that are like super, like they mostly come from prize lists, but they are super like literary, but like not particularly good in my opinion. And then there are so many books that just don't even make the like list of all of the books. And I feel like when we think about Booktube as like an entity, as a community, like approachability is one of the words that I would like personally put in the Booktube, like apply to Booktube. And I just feel like so many of the books that show up on the Booktube prize, at least in the first round, are the most unapproachable books. And I know that there's been an ask for years to allow people to submit books, and I know that Robert is one person, and so it's like that's hard to manage, but like I feel like we're at a point where it makes sense to like have multiple people helping with this, in order, like volunteering to like compile the initial list, so that it's not just his responsibility to find the books, because like when it's just one person, like you can't be privy to everything that's out there. But I just think like we need a list of books that's more approachable, because out of the 6 books that are in my group, 3 of them are like something I would never recommend to an average reader. Like I would never recommend them on my Booktube channel as something that would be like widely of interest to people. So like I just feel like if we're going to call it the Booktube Prize, it needs to be more illustrative of the kinds of things that booktubers recommend and not the kinds of things that end up on book prizes, like, only. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if I'm alone in that sentiment, but I'm getting a little bit frustrated this round with what I am currently reading. So I'd like to issue an apology to this book for calling it whatever I did in the last clip. Yeah, so this one, it is actually pretty quick, like a pretty quick read. I'm already over 50% in, and most of that was read in the last like 2 days. It is a shorter book, so I think it's only like 280 pages, maybe. But like, I am actually interested in this story. So we have a man named Tom Rourke. He, I think, is from maybe Ireland and has come to the United States. This seems to be set in like a Western esque, like basically in like the frontier timeline, because they are like, the beginning of it takes place in Butte, Montana, and then he and another character flee, and they are like he's in love, she's in love, they flee, but under like some dicey circumstances. And so we're following them right now. They've like made it out through the wilderness, and like different people they encounter, different things they do. They are absurd characters, and they make the poorest of choices. And it's just super entertaining to read. It is definitely very much on the literary end of the spectrum. And like, while there's a plot, it's still really like very no plot-y. But I like it so far. So this is a pleasant surprise. I finished A Heart in Winter, and this one I surprisingly liked. So when I first started reading it, obviously I was like, what is this dribble? Because, sorry, it's like daylight savings day, whatever. The time changed at this morning. So I am tired. But basically it's about this couple. And in the beginning you're like following this guy who's kind of like, I don't know the right word, a layabout. He like drinks, does drugs, just sort of like exists, and is kind of a troublemaker. And then he meets this woman who, it alludes to, her past is not great. But like they run off into the woods, and so then it like follows them throughout this whole story. But I liked how it like switched perspectives. So you had their perspectives, but you also would like come back to the perspective of somebody in Butte. And then you would get these people who were trying to find them. You get their perspective. And so they all sort of like came in and out of each other in a way, like wove around each other. So it wasn't a very like straightforward narrative, but the whole time it was clear that like the narrative was about these people, and like the transience of love, or like how somebody can make an impact on you. And it just, I don't know, it wasn't super deep, to be honest, but it was a fast read. It was an intriguing read, and it kept me turning pages, and it was short. So I definitely had a good time with this one, which I can't say for some of the books in this category. I would say this is probably now my number 3, moving the Elif Shafak book to number 2, because this is probably like a 3.75 not quite a 4. And it's definitely not better than There Are Rivers in the Sky. So that's where we're landed with that one. All right, you're probably wondering why I'm not being super optimistic about Enlightenment by Sarah Perry. So here's the thing with Sarah Perry. I read The Essex Serpent, and while I liked it, I didn't love it. I thought it was kind of slow and a little pretentious. And so I don't know a ton about this. I do own, this is the one book that I own. I don't have it. It's in the other room and I don't feel like going to get it. So this is the one I owned prior to being assigned this set of books. And I don't know. After seeing it on the Booker long list with Creation Lake, which I did not enjoy, I am like, my optimism sunk a little lower, because knowing that the previous book I read felt slow and pretentious, I am not in a mindset right now to enjoy slow and pretentious. I want to read something fun at this point, which is why I think The Heart in Winter worked for me right now. So all of that said, I'm gonna start the audiobook of Enlightenment tomorrow on my way to work, and we'll see how far we get on it, because while I have the physical book, I really don't think that I am going to be able to read it and get through it. And frankly, I'm just ready to move on to something fun. And that's what I'm going to do, is read a physical book of my choosing, while I listen to this last one to round out the Booktube prize. You're going to be really happy for me. I'm enjoying this so much more than I thought I would. I'm almost 50% through this, and it has definitely captured my attention, and I am liking it a lot. So this is about a man named Thomas who is 50 years old. He's a writer, and he's not married. He doesn't have any family, but he is like attached to this church, and there's a child there who, well, she's just turned 18, but she is a little girl who lost her mother when she was born. And when he saw her, he had like a connection with her. So he's sort of been like a mentor or like a second father to her throughout her life. And like when he saw her for the first time, that day he was planning to leave the church and not come back. But then this connection with this girl, Grace, is what sort of kept him there. The other thing that we learned fairly quickly, and I think it's pretty obvious from like the very get-go, is that Thomas is gay. And so he is like internally battling with his faith and his homosexuality in this kind of like time period. I think it's set actually in the 90s. However, like the other book of Sarah Perry's, The Essex Serpent, it feels like it's set a lot earlier than it is. There's just something about it that, like, initially I thought it was set further back, and then like different references to different 90s things will like pop in, and I'm like, whoa, what? So that's like, that part sort of doesn't work for me for some reason. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. It's set in the 90s. And the other part of it is that there's this woman, Maria Vadova, who was living in this old house, like near the churchyard. And she's like a mystery. So for the longest, people like just forgot she existed. But slowly he and this other man are kind of like uncovering her history. And it's all around like the moon and the stars and celestial astronomical things. And so we're getting little pieces of her story through letters and diary entries that they're recovering. And that part is super fascinating. Like, I want to know her story so much more than I really care about Thomas and Grace's stories. But it's all kind of like tying together in a way. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this. Looking forward to learning more about Maria Vadova and her story. And I'm almost to part 2, which skips up to 2008. So there's a time jump there. So we'll see what happens when I get there. But yes, happy that we're going to be ending out, or I'm assuming going to end out this video on a high note. Yeah. So I feel like this has just sort of cemented my feeling that Sarah Perry is just not for me. So just like with the Essex Serpent, the beginning of this was like super compelling and I was excited and interested. And there's a particular storyline about Maria Vadova Bell, who's like this woman that lived in this old house in the town that this man lives in. And we're finding out like what happened to her, what just like things about her life. And that storyline was super interesting. And the first half of it focused a lot more on that. And then we go to like part 2 and part 3, and it dragged so badly. It was just kind of excruciatingly boring. And it's mostly then just about our main character, Thomas, and our other main character, Grace, and like their lives. There's big time jumps. And like, I just didn't care. Like, I didn't care about Thomas's life, didn't care about Grace's life. I only really cared to know like the story about Maria. And I felt like we got so little information and it was like stretched way out. And like, it felt super unsatisfying, to be honest. So, yeah, not loving this one. I think ultimately I'm going to give it like a 3.5 stars, which does mean that it falls below the waterline. So this puts it in 4th place, which is kind of where I thought it might fall based on like my own thoughts about past experience with Sarah Perry, which turns out to be very true. So I think probably in the future, Sarah Perry is going to be a pass for me, just because this is now 2 books that I haven't had the best time with. So yeah, unfortunately not the exciting ending I was hoping to have. There you have it. That's my final ranking. It honestly didn't move too much from where I thought the books would fall when I finished them. So Tell Me Everything is my number 1, and like far and above my number 1. Definitely the best book I read in this whole thing, and probably one of the ones I would never have picked up otherwise. And now I'm really interested in reading more by Elizabeth Strout. And then the Elif Shafak book, There Are Rivers in the Sky, comes in 2nd, which I thought that was a really well-written book, very interesting, compelling, wanted to pick it up, so happy with that. Everything from like 3 onward is sort of like, like I didn't love them, would not be surprised to see some of these move in priority for other people. So for me, The Heart in Winter got 3rd place just because it was interesting and I wanted to keep reading it. And so that alone made it, to me, more approachable, which again, I talked earlier about how I think Booktube Prize should be more approachable than it currently is. So that's part of what influenced that. And also I just wanted to pick it up. The 3, like, or the 4, 5, and 6 are books that like I genuinely could have DNF'd any of these at some point while reading them. So Enlightenment by Sarah Perry comes in fourth, and you just heard me talk about it. I just underwhelmed is probably the best thing to say about this. So it gets 4. Creation Lake was just basically incomprehensible, and I don't get it. I don't understand why people love it. So, or why it's made 2 prize lists. So that's my number 5. And then The Hunter by Tana French is number 6 because it was boring. It like didn't feel like a fun, like, I don't know, it just, as a mystery, I felt like I would be more compelled by it or more excited by it, and it wasn't exciting, it wasn't interesting, and it just wasn't well written, in my opinion. So yeah, that is it. That's my final ranking, and I look forward to seeing which ones have moved on to the next round, which I will not be judging. Okay, bye.